Morning, welcome to our first live panel of EdTech Week. We're joined by superb colleagues from all over the country, and I'm going to kick off, and I'll let them introduce themselves as we go. But I thought I'd kick off with Benjamin. Welcome all the way from Warrington. You're beamed into Devon, and then we beam it out from Devon. Slightly confusing, but absolutely superbly hosted by Jonathan, who you'll meet in a little minute, from Cornerstone, from a primary school, would you believe, built in 1810, and we're going live from their TV studio. So we were saying earlier, I wonder what those teachers, those educators from 1810 would make of our times at the moment. Ben, welcome to EdTech Week.
Morning, thanks for having me, Ty. It's good to be here.
So, how are you?
Not doing too bad. I'll give a brief introduction, if that's all right, just of myself so people get the context. My school is part of the EdTech Demonstrator program. It's King's Leadership Academy in Warrington, and we're part of a larger but a small trust called the Great Schools Trust. So we're trying best we can to support primary, secondary, even some higher education, with their move along this continuum from what we were doing pre-COVID to whatever support we're trying to do now. This is my 12th year of teaching, and I'm the vice principal and also lead the program here up at Warrington.
What was it like in March? Were you a digitally rich school? Had you got everything tip top? It was perfect as we went into lockdown. What was it like for you guys up there?
Well, I think we had the infrastructure in place. Obviously, we weren't ready by any means in terms of a wholly remote, fully locked down curriculum, or now the blended learning. Our pupils do have one-to-one devices. So we had that backbone ready, to kind of lay down some systems on top of. Myself and the principal, both science teachers, we kind of saw on the horizon in February that maybe some plans might have to be put in place for what might be, coming along, which it inevitably was towards the end of March. So for us, it was just a case of thinking, okay, what infrastructure do we have now? What are we comfortable with using? And what do we need to kind of, like I say, lay on top of it? So for us, it was having a trial of, the various systems for communicating with pupils. We're based with Google. That's just what we happened to use beforehand. So again, thinking how we could use the systems we already had in place to continue teaching or sharing resources or giving feedback or making sure pupils were safe. That's kind of how we spent the first few weeks, seeing what we could implement on top of our provision already.
What was some of the learning that you've taken? It's now November, looking back, and also your work in the EdTech Demonstrator. What's some of the learning that you think is out there for us on this digital journey?
Yeah, so one of the biggest things that we're seeing now, especially now we have attendance of, say, like on average 70 to 80% of schools, and we now got a large proportion of pupils at home as well as physically with us. It's thinking what systems we could use. So when we do go back to normality, whatever that looks like in 2021, what systems can we keep using because they're just better for us? So a lot of the discussions I'm having with schools, for example, we have a parents' evening that we're doing tomorrow, and it's going to be fully done electronically. And we were talking about this as a senior leadership team of, isn't it strange that you always do what you've always done? So, having hundreds of parents milling around in the hall, vying for position to try and speak to the next maths teacher. Whereas now we're really seeing the silver lining of, like, obviously the situation's terrible and we don't want, people dying and we don't want the kids at home. But I wonder, what are those little gems that we can pull out of it? So for that example of a parents' evening, we have all the pupils' books electronically. Parents don't have to take hours off of work. They don't have to take half days. Staff can now work from home. And again, it's trying to find those systems that actually we're probably better for because of it. The second main learning thing that we're trying to push to any school that we work with the EdTech Demonstrator program is try and find that deep leadership from within your staff body. So, for example, we posed a question to our staff of, okay, what's the best way to give feedback to our pupils? And instead of just having your 4 members of SLT trying to attack the problem, let's just see what people already know. What systems are some staff using because they have a podcast or they have a blog or they make YouTube videos? And having that deep leadership, knowing that, you don't always know the best solutions. I reckon we work with people who could grab the bull by the horns and really take the training for staff to the next level. So that's probably the second main thing we're seeing now, staff from within the school offering what they think is the best viewpoint moving forward. So they're kind of maybe the two main things of how it's changing now in November compared to how it was in March.
Thank you so much. Deborah, welcome. Welcome all the way from Grimsby. Lovely to have you join us. I'm usually talking to you on the flight deck of the USS Enterprise. So it's fantastic to see how many pictures you have of the USS Enterprise on your wall behind you. You're part of the EdTech Demonstrator, a big college up there in Grimsby, many connections through your work with JISC and your leadership on digital skills. Looking back, and clearly we don't want to spend too long back in March, what were some of the things that were happening to you as a leader to Grimsby Institute then, and what's some of the learning that you've taken forward?
I think we were in a very fortunate position, Ty, because we were already a very digitally rich organisation. We, as a large general further education college, flexibility of delivery and use of technology was kind of in our DNA and had been for quite some time. So we'd already been on quite a significant journey. I think that the key thing for me as a leader was recognising that actually it's not about the technology, it's about the people, and how those people interact with the technology, how our students interact with the technology. So we were already very digitally rich, but we'd used technology operationally. We'd used it to support student achievement. We'd used it to make ease of communication more straightforward, all of which was fairly routine. We found we had to make a transformation to use technology for welfare purposes as well, for both staff and students. And that for us, I think, was one of the biggest opportunities to learn and to develop. The checking in on staff, the checking in on learners, providing online enrichment and social activities, making sure that it was still very much a further education community, not just a series of courses that are delivered online.
That's interesting. So as you became digitally richer, as you went online, also the needs for that pastoral support were increased, or is that just so obvious that it's hardly worth mentioning? But
it really is important, Ty. It really did increase. That lack of contact, particularly during the first lockdown, was very detrimental to the mental health of some of our students. They had quite difficult circumstances at home, and being locked up in the house was not conducive to them having a good educational experience and a good personal experience. So our success coach and pastoral team really were working every hour during lockdown to show personal support on a per learner basis, to show support to cohorts, to do large-scale personal development events, including things like Prevent, Fundamental British Values, promoting safeguarding, avoiding being groomed online, 101 other things that became much more acute during that period.
And how were you able to reach out? I mean, were you talked about digital being in the DNA of Grimsby and your leadership, but how did you reach out to perhaps people that didn't have devices or didn't have the kind of family support? I mean, did you use the old-fashioned telephone, or?
We used anything and everything, including socially distanced home visits if required.
Really?
We were able to push out hundreds of devices to our students. We robbed every laptop trolley in the college. Our view was that if everyone's working from home, there's no use them sitting there. So we raided every spare pot of budget we had to buy extra devices. We delivered them. Some of our areas are very rural. Transport links weren't great, so our pastoral team physically drove out the devices, including dongles where necessary, because data, of course, is a very expensive resource for some of our students and their families. So we were already a Microsoft Showcase college as well, and we had teams quite well embedded in the fabric of what we did. And I think the first lockdown really brought our readiness into sharp focus.
Superb. Well, and now the learning in the autumn. How do you feel about the autumn now? Better equipped, much more focused on that, developing that pastoral link. But how's the work going on the EdTech Demonstrator? I understand from the other Deborah that the work with primaries is illuminating for you.
Very much so, and that's quite a surprise for us. I always think it's fascinating learning about different phases of education, because teaching in its bones is teaching, regardless of where you are, but what surrounds it varies from primary through to secondary, through to us in tertiary. It's been a genuine eye-opener for us to meet with primary colleagues and see that although the challenges sometimes aren't different, the barriers are much more difficult to overcome in a small setting where I have, just short of 1,000 staff. There's always someone, if that makes sense, in an organisation as large as a big further education college. But some of our primary colleagues, there's maybe 10 or 12 staff, and everybody's up to capacity, and nobody can do these things. And so for us, it's been really beneficial for us to learn how it works, because ultimately education is a continuum type, and those youngsters at 4, 5, 6 and 7 will be ours in 10 years. And so understanding how they've moved through that system as a coherent whole with technology as the backbone is incredibly valuable to us.
Superb. Thanks for being with us. Really appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Tristan, welcome. Tristan Kirkpatrick from Outward Grange Academies Trust. You're part of the EdTech Demonstrator. We always look enviously at I'm sure it's a screensaver behind you. They can't be real guitars or that Marshall amp. I know they're not real. Tell us a few of your favourite songs around EdTech.
Well, I wasn't expecting that one, Ty. Yeah, look, I'm Tristan. I'm Director of Computer Science for Outward Grange Academies Trust. I'm also leading the EdTech Demonstrator project for our trust, which has just been an incredible journey so far. And I guess just to give a little bit of context, and this certainly is me getting out of telling you my favourite songs, Ty, but to give you a bit of context about our trust and our position, I would say that kind of going into March, our infrastructure, what was there, very much like I know Ben was saying for his circumstance earlier, the infrastructure was there. We're a G Suite or Google Workspace kind of provider, and that's what we use. And it's just it was very, very different for teachers having to very quickly move from delivering their lessons in a classroom to being able to provision that learning, that online curriculum offer online.
Yeah.
So whilst the infrastructure was there for us, and we're really confident that our staff, could use Google Workspace and were proficient in their use of technology, it was definitely a real shift very quickly to, okay, so how do we now use this technology to enhance and to offer a curriculum? And I would think that many people will have had the same stumbling blocks that we had, in that IT access is absolutely essential. And we were providing schools, and we were providing students with 4G dongles and Chromebooks and laptops and whatever we could to ensure that our learners weren't disadvantaged by the situation. And a bit of a side note about Outward Grange Academies Trust in the northeast of England, we've got over 30 schools all the way from primary to post-16. We've also got an alternative provision centre now, which is fantastic. Yeah. But quite a lot of our schools are in some of the most kind of deprived areas, and that obviously has an impact on the access to technology that those students have. So for us, straight away, it was a real race to make sure that our students had the opportunities that other students have when it comes to their online curriculum. And I think a few kind of, I think a lot of the challenges will be fairly universal, but a few challenges that we had and things that we saw real value in tackling straight away was things like, teachers, a lot of our teachers use visualizers in a classroom, the webcams that point down at the desk so you can model work and that sort of thing. It was going from our teachers confidently using that in a classroom to our teachers confidently using that to create things like explainer videos and how to embed that visualizer into Google Meet, for example. So straight away, our teachers, because they've some crazy innovation has happened with our teachers, and the most creative things have been happening. And our teachers were saying, right, we want Screencastify, we want Loom, we want X, Y, and Z, and we were making that happen to ensure that ultimately our students were getting the best curriculum offer we could give them at the time. That's not to say there hasn't been kind of lessons learned over time.
I'd imagine, and also I think what you'd done, which I think was important, was you tried to cascade those that digital literacy capability amongst your teaching colleagues. And so you had nominated, which I thought was very interesting, you had nominated lead EdTech teachers across your academy schools. Can you just take us through that as well?
Yeah, so something that we've done that has been incredibly successful, and I hope would continue is we've appointed 26 EdTech leaders. So bearing in mind we've got over 30 schools, it's not quite one EdTech leader per school, but we've appointed 26 EdTech leaders based on their technical ability, the phase in which they work in. So for example, some are primary, some are secondary, some are English specialists, some are math specialists. So within our kind of cohort of 26 EdTech leaders, we've got some really good practice that we can share between our large trust and also externally. So they've been absolutely incredible, our leaders, taking requests from their own schools, for example, or other schools, how teachers saying, how can I do this in maths? We use White Rose Maths for worksheets. How can I deliver that to students online so that they can answer the questions and I can mark it? Things like that. And really specialist advice is what they're giving on a day-to-day basis. So bringing that forward into the EdTech Demonstrator program, our 26 EdTech leaders have been running training sessions for other schools, quite often primary schools. I think we're finding a lot of primary schools are signing up.
Yeah.
And we're running these training sessions, but something we've done fairly recently with the EdTech Demonstrator external part of our kind of offer is we've developed an online forum with all of our EdTech leaders have access to it. And if schools that we're supporting want to ask any questions on there, how do I use a visualizer in my live lesson, for example, our EdTech leaders are straight onto that and can provide some real kind of experience from the ground, little tips and tricks that might be missed if you're talking about it just as a theoretical thing. So they're absolutely incredible, and what a fantastic team to have throughout the whole kind of pandemic. They've just gone over and above to make sure that students, not just in our schools but in other schools, are getting the very best. So we're very lucky to have that team, Ty, and I know I've mentioned them to you before a few times because we're just so pleased to have them.
But isn't that one of the hallmarks of these months has been the profession, the ability of the profession to adapt, to pioneer, perhaps in the shortest time possible. I mean, one of the comments from Tim Clark is that he's got a friend who works at the NHS that have talked about for years, he says, about having an online appointment system that works. And here we are. There's Ben having parents' evenings that are working superbly. There's also a really interesting comment here backing up what Deborah was saying about that you're saying that we are a one entry primary school. That is a real challenge, and that developing pace, developing capability has been really, really important in staff teams. Let me go over to Louise. Louise, welcome.
Hello.
Hello, welcome from Oldham Sixth Form College. You were, I think, a Wave 2 EdTech Demonstrator, because you may remember as soon as the EdTech Demonstrator began, we also launched plans, which was really welcome from the DfE to expand the programme to Wave 2, and you were one of the Wave 2s. How's it been for you? I mean, clearly the Northwest, in terms of its community transmission cases, and indeed in Tristan's areas, it's been a high COVID count up there. How's it been for you and your colleagues, Louise?
Well, I'll put it all into context first and go back to March. I think actually our journey began in 2016 when we realised that our VLE was outdated. We had Microsoft and it wasn't working for us. So we developed a 3-year digital learning strategy to start in 2017. Which meant that we then had laptops for every member of staff, which we hadn't had previously. We did a proper investigation about what it was that would suit us in terms of replacing our VLE, and that was Google for Education. So we were enabled to make a really informed decision about what it was that we needed. We set up a pilot group, several pilot groups, and a train the trainer model to look at how we could use it in the college. And then we trained every single member of staff, both teachers and office staff, in using Google. In the summer, we had an entire week of inset in the summer, excuse me, where we trained everybody. And that meant that by the time we got to about February, we were using it, and we were using it very successfully, really. Probably more so in vocational courses, where a lot of their work is project-based work, than we were in academic courses. But academic courses were still uploading classroom materials. I'm an essay-based subject, so actually marking online wasn't suitable to me. I needed students to handwrite in timed conditions, but we were still using Google Classroom. A bit like Ben, when it got to February as a senior leadership team, we were kind of, we need to start planning for this. We need to start making some contingency plans just in case they close us down. So we started to get teams to think about, if we were to close down, what needed to be online. And we started to make that gradual move that by the 18th of March, that was our full staff meeting of, this looks inevitable. They hadn't made a decision at that point, but this looks inevitable. These are the things that we need you to do. What else do you need us to do? And that was the point where we did some quick training on using what we already had on our laptops, which was FreeCam, to record lessons. And then since then, we've looked at Loom, Screencastify. We've allowed staff to use whatever it is suits them in terms of those pre-recorded methods, but we are Google Classroom and G Suite. So we were in a really strong position at that point. And I think, like the others have said, there were some staff that found it difficult to transition to online learning quickly and effectively, but there were emerging digital champions, as well as the EdTech team that we already had in place to support staff. So from March onwards, it was a kind of gradual increasing of staff skills. We started with just get some materials on Google Classroom that the students could use, and then we started to develop our practice incrementally. Luckily, for the last 2 years, whenever students have joined us, we have insisted as part of the induction that they download all of the apps that were needed for Google to function on any device. So the students were already using it. They already had it on their phones and other devices, so that we didn't have that panic of how we're going to get students to use this, because they already had everything. And like Deborah said, we used every method we had available to us to get dongles and devices out there. We'd invested heavily in tech since 2017 to make sure we had devices that students could borrow just by putting a card in a machine, and we just requisitioned all of those devices, set them up so that they could go out. We used every iPad, every laptop that we had in the building to get it out there, and then we just took the hit on funding everything else. So that was our journey during lockdown, really.
And then incredibly, you applied. you applied to be not only build your own institution and support your own institution, and but then to be an EdTech demonstrator, to look outward as well.
Yeah, well, we were already a teaching school, so school-to-school support wasn't new to us. We'd done a lot of staff training, a lot of going in and supporting individual schools, so we had those skills already. We're also a research school. We're an associate research school for the Education Endowment Foundation. Yeah. So one of the things I've been very keen on during lockdown was not just training staff on how to use things, but I was trying to gather what the research showed was the best bet. So we weren't running down a rabbit hole of things that weren't going to have impact. We were looking at, with the limited evidence base that we had, what might work. And I just felt that we had a lot to offer schools. And also, in our journey from 2017 to 2019, we'd made a lot of mistakes and we'd learned such a lot. Yeah. So I felt that we were in a place to stop schools making those mistakes because we needed to save them time. They didn't have the time to play and try things out. They needed to be told what would work, and then adapt.
And sorry, I've heard you, obviously we've debated before, but I've heard you be really frank about the mistakes, about the cul-de-sacs, the zigs and zags. You've been really frank about those, and that's made you a better educator.
Yeah, we did make a lot of mistakes through trial and error, really, in terms of how staff were setting things up. It was the basics of setting things up, making sure that we got the absolute basics in place before we tried to do anything that was more creative, really. And I think when we went into lockdown, we were in a position where we could start to innovate and be creative. I think, like others have said, it was the kind of silver lining in that cloud. Lockdown enabled us to catapult everything forward to a place that we wanted to be, but we hadn't really had the time to be. And we had some blockers, the blockers that were, it's not going to work in my subject. I was one of them, in terms of written subjects. I need my students to be doing writing for the exam. So I didn't want them uploading work that was typed. I needed them to have that practice.
What's your subject, Louise? What do you teach?
I teach A-level English language.
Okay, and now how does EdTech feel as a tool for English language?
It's working really well for us. I think that our students, because at the moment, what we know is that we are going ahead with exams. So we are still encouraging students to do handwritten work and upload handwritten work, as well as typing work, because we've got to prepare them for that exam and we've got to prepare them for those time conditions. And that's quite hard when you're online. In fact, one of our webinars coming up is about extended writing practice in an online context, because if we go ahead with those exams, they need that practice. And our year 12 students, we are one of the few colleges that still does AS exams. And of course, the students that are just coming into year 12 have never done an exam, ever. Yeah. They've done a mock, but they've never done a formal exam. So we need that practice if, as the government suggests, we are going to be doing exams at the end of the year.
And the EdTech Demonstrator, the power, final question to you, the power of peer-to-peer support. What have you seen it unlock?
Oh, I just think it's been incredible, and I'd echo what Deborah says, because I'm a sixth form college, and I think initially I said to you, I can't support a primary school. Don't give me any primary schools. And now most of our schools are primary schools, because actually Deborah's right. The skills are universal. What I'm learning is how we can now adapt that in a primary context. So I'm learning a lot from primary schools. But I think it's the gratitude that people have got, that there is somebody out there for them that can just say, I'm here to help you. I will do what you need us to do. Let's talk about how it's going to work. And I think that the other bonus is I'm often saying everything is free. And people say to me, can I pass it on to another school? And I say, don't even ask. It's free. Just give it to them. You know, we don't need to keep reinventing this wheel. We maybe need to change the tyres and change the kind of wheel it is.
Yeah.
But we don't need to reinvent that wheel. And I think the beauty of the EdTech Demonstrator programme is that it's all free and schools can just take what it is that they need and then work with that to suit their own context.
We absolutely. We also get a fair deal of schools saying, well, what's the catch?
Yeah. And it takes a while for me to say, honestly, there isn't one. I'm here whenever you need me. I'm at the other end of an email or the other end of a Google Meet whenever you need me. And there's no charge for it. So they are learning that now. And also learning that, you know, if they know another school that might benefit, they can pass all that on to them and encourage them to sign up as well. So I think it's grown and grown with word of mouth, really. And, you know, I've done a lot of work with getting into head teacher meetings. Yes. Locally and local authority meetings to say to them, this is available. You have to let your schools know about this.
Our latest inquiry was over 150 schools came from a place quite near you. And we thought, well, yes, that's a batch. Yeah,
that's probably my fault.
Yeah, probably is your fault. Yeah, 154 to be precise. I knew the 150 was you. Thank you so much. Let's go to our host down in Devon, Jonathan. Morning. You and I were rehearsing earlier today with your super duper studio. How has the journey been for you in terms of you'd piloted, tried, you'd got digital capability, you'd also designed another school around some of the lessons that you'd learned. How's it been for Cornerstone and you and the team?
Yeah, I think probably a little bit like you know, the others on this panel today. It's been a rapid rise, a rapid race through this journey. It's been really fraught and busy because the demand by schools out there at the moment is massive. I think the overnight rapid adoption of new ways of working has meant schools of all phases, whether it's from infant schools all the way through to tertiary colleges, as we've been hearing today, have actually cross-phase as professionals been collaborating and working together to share best practice in a way that I think hasn't been seen you know, before. Really, you know, we've had MATs come along, haven't we? And MATs have brought schools together and brought a little bit of that. But this overarching requirement to work in new ways that are transformational has brought people together. So I think it's been a really busy time. Yeah. I think it's been a really exciting time. You know, I think Tristan said about the silver lining. And sometimes, you know, on Twitter, you can get drawn into the negativity. Actually, I think there's an awful lot of positivity around the silver linings, that what we're starting to do through these difficult times is create, you know, it's quite an American phrase, but people are starting to sort of reimagine the possibilities at every level. You know, I'm primary based, but I think, you know, we're working with some big trusts and some secondary colleges. And, you know, some of the groundbreaking stuff that instead of taking teachers to children, you could actually, I mean, children to teachers, you could take teachers to children. Instead of moving 1,000 children around corridors in one-way systems with masks on, take the teachers to the children and use the tech and make the tech work for you in a new way. I think we began by this adoption to tech and lots of teachers going, I don't know where to begin. Some of our early days of support, the most popular webinar we ran that took me by surprise was how to use PowerPoint.
Yeah.
You know, our least popular one actually was keeping children safe online. I don't think that meant that we didn't want to keep children safe online, but there were whole chunk of teachers going, I don't know where to begin. I think in those early stages, we were, as we were hearing, keeping in touch with really disadvantaged families that were struggling with this tech. I think now the sorts of conversations we're having actually is, how do we make this work in that breadth and depth of curriculum? How do we upskill teachers to be confident at talking down a camera and doing live lessons? I mean, one of the questions that has come in on this chat today has been for the panel, but it says, how valuable to the panel, how valuable do the panel think that Oak Academy has been? And you might want to ask them that in a moment. But for me, that real debate around synchronous and asynchronous, about having some materials that you may want people to watch in advance or as part of the lesson in that self-directed online learning, but actually the transformational shift that's happening that says that real-time live engagement with your students makes a massive difference to their well-being, to their cognitive development. It's not just about online materials, it's about live education. And I think that's opened up a big can of worms. It's a national debate, but the benefits we're seeing to children, to families, when there's that live engagement of children with their teachers. Now, I'm sure it's cross phase, but you know, I know as a primary, even down with young children seeing their teachers and staying in touch with them, and even seeing their friends online live has been massive. But as a dad, for my children who are taking GCSEs or at college, when they've had live lessons and they've spoken to their teachers and their tutors, it's made a massive, massive difference. And I think that's something to be debated, is how do you get the quality of those live lessons? And you're actually upskilling a workforce, aren't you, to work in a new way. And it's not just online, it's this blended learning in person with children whilst you've got remote attendees. It's a new skill set.
Absolutely new skill set. And you talked about content. I mean, also an amazing creative eruption of content. Robin Hood, Matt, Greensward Academy Trust, Charles Dickens down in Southwark, BBC Bite Size, Oak. I mean, the creativity that's out there in the profession is remarkable. We've got a very interesting question here, Jonathan. I'll just put it to you about what have been your most successful strategies in terms of generating community-wide buy-in into the use of EdTech? Did you experience significant challenges?
You know, I think with tech over the years, my real belief is that when people see a benefit, it's not necessarily about time saving. We all want to think it saves time, but it's when there's that engagement because it makes a difference to my life, people buy into that tech. And sometimes the people that are more cynical, and we all can be at the starts of journey, go, can that really work for me? Does it fit? I mean, one of the panelists here saying, you know, could it work in my subject? You see that happening, you know, across the board with us all. But the buy-in comes when you see the benefit. Real anecdote for me, but I've told this to lots of people, so apologies if people have heard it, but I decided during lockdown, when everything was online and virtual, that we would deliver a lesson to all students within our MAC. Now, we're only a small MAC. We've got about 1,200 students, about 180 staff, going from 2-year-olds in the nursery through to 11-year-olds. We're only a primary MAP, but I decided we wanted to get everybody into a lesson that I would deliver. So I chose cooking because I can't cook. I tried to persuade them that it was a great nutritional lesson, but I just had a bit of banter and fun. And I was in my kitchen at home with my wife, who was teaching me to cook, but I was teaching her to cook. But you know what it got was a highlight of a week for me, but actually for families. It brought all age groups together. It brought young children, siblings, family groups together to cook a meal or to cook something that they would eat that night, and they were photographing it, posting it to Facebook, chatting about it. Had nothing to do with cooking. It had everything to do with that community cohesion that we were trying to create as a trust. And I think it wasn't that every lesson should be delivered en masse in that way. What it was so often in lockdown, I think people got fixated on putting up the work that children needed to do. And of course that's important, but it was in isolation in their bedrooms, often feeling quite lonely and unsupported. It wasn't that asynchronous experience that they loved. What it was when they could start to work more collaboratively and online in that real way. So I think getting community cohesion and getting the tech to work for you is about bringing a real benefit and purpose. And when you can achieve that and you can support people in achieving that, it escalates massively the uptake. You get teachers, you get students, you get parents, you get the wider community all coming together, and you get exponential growth in the adoption of tech.
That's superb. So your trick was the galloping gourmet of the Southwest.
Well, you know, of course, anything I cooked was, pre-done by my wife.
So final moments. I just want to go round the panel, and I'm thinking about Ben's phrase. If you've done what you've always done, I guess you get what you've always got. What are your hopes? What are your hopes for the future as we look? These are difficult times, and I guess as human beings, we all want to look at silver linings, and it's important that you, as leaders, are hopeful and optimistic. But what's one of your biggest, Ben, your biggest wishes for the future as you look to December and the new year in terms of digital?
Yeah, I think just trying to use the platforms that we have and the networks that we do, just to try and help our pupils. I think of how turbulent it was for our exam year groups, as an example, at the end of last year, and how much unknown there was, and it just, the unrest it causes, not only in the profession, but in the communities as well. So I hope we can, be maybe a bit more accustomed to the tech, or develop those links where we can just make that transition as smooth as we can. Like you say, I think the profession's doing unbelievably well. And when maybe there's not the guidance we need from the powers that be, we just kind of go, okay, we're just going to solve this ourselves and just make it work. So hopefully with this EdTech program and the links it provides for us, just making that transition for maybe those older pupils and their families just a bit smoother moving forwards, I think, Ty.
Those are good wishes. It's the first time I've seen you from your stationery cupboard. You've usually got this really sophisticated screensaver. I'm glad you've got.
Well, this is a green back. It's a green backdrop. It's actually the picture I chose. I was like, Ty needs a cupboard.
Deborah, your wishes for the digital future.
I very much hope that we're able to build and learn on everything that's happened, because it's not just about the silver lining, it's what foundation that gives us. For many of us, we've been pushing the EdTech message for the last 20 years, and we haven't managed to make it get traction, not in the way I think some of us would want. This has forced our hand. The question now is, can we make sure it sticks, and can we make sure it then evolves? Because we're heading into the fourth industrial revolution. The nature of work is changing. The process that we'll currently go through will accelerate that change in work. And working in the tertiary sector, my job is to get my students a job ultimately. So I have to make sure they're ready for that changing and much more technological world of work. So I hope that in future, the students that come into us at 16 have already experienced that in secondary and have already experienced that in primary, so that we're able to really build on those skills and exit out into industry and university some really technologically excellent learners who can help grow our economy.
I love that it sticks and importantly evolves. I think that's a really good message. Tristan, what's your...
Yeah, look, I couldn't agree more with what's been said before, but for me, continuing to better our curriculum for our students. Our curriculum offer, no matter, you know, whichever student that is, making sure that we're closing those disadvantage gaps is vital to us. And obviously our curriculum offer would include mental well-being, and whatever happens going forward for our students, you know, whether it's online or it's offline, that needs to improve. Everyone's support of our students needs to improve going forwards, because it's obviously an extremely difficult time for them. So for me, it's all about the curriculum offer that we can provide to them.
Superb. Thank you, Tristan. Louise, your hopes for the digital future?
Well, I think we've opened Pandora's box now, and that lid is not to go back on. And I think now is an opportunity. Like Deborah said, you know, we've been trying to push this for a long time, and yet interestingly there's no mention of digital pedagogy in either the teacher standards, the new early career framework, or the ITT core framework. So there's a gap, and yet they are very new frameworks. So I think going forward, this isn't going to change. We have to continue to develop it and look at how it can improve our practice, improve our workload, because it should do, but most of all, improve learning. I think we have to think about learning at the heart of everything and not the tech. We need to be led by the learning, really, which I think is what these platforms offer us. It's not about shiny new things and being a magpie about that. It's about looking at the platforms that we've got and how we can use them really effectively to create independent learners, because I think really that's what these platforms offer us. I'm always banging on about making sure that metacognition and self-regulation is at the heart of this, because as Deborah says, we are going into this new way of working, and pupils have to learn that. I know there's a fear about e-safety and safeguarding, but at the end of the day, we've had to learn how to behave professionally during lockdown by making sure we are dressed appropriately, our backgrounds are appropriate when we are delivering, and we shouldn't be afraid of pupils being online with us, because it's our job to teach them how to be effective workers online, because this is their future.
Thank you. Slightly staggering that ITT, Early Career Framework, and a whole range of professional qualifications don't perhaps even mention digital. And I think if there's one message from EdTech Week, let's sort out our professional development across the piece. Jonathan, as our host, last word to you in terms of your hopes, not only in terms of your own cooking, but in terms of the digital future.
Yeah, I share all of the thoughts that have been said there, that it's opened Pandora's box. The future is looking bright. I think that there's so many exciting opportunities, and I would just draw people back to, we know that the qualitative difference to children is great teaching, and you can't replace teachers. But what you can do is upskill the teachers to work in a 21st century that we're now 20 years into. This should not be new and innovative. This should be bread and butter. And there are so many opportunities to start to really rethink education. It's no longer about 9 till 3:30 with 30 in a class walking around old corridors. It's about bringing together groups of children from different institutions in different age bands, in different group sizes, with different approaches, that is going to really enrich their learning experience, that they might become those successful, independent learners, lifelong learners. And I think if anyone thinks we're going back to the good old days, I think, in my view, we'll have lost an opportunity. And if people just want a new normal, dare I say it, of a bit of webcam talking like this, I think it's just the beginning of a journey. You know, I started today from our television studio, and the power of video in today's world, from asynchronous video chat to synchronous live lessons to quality broadcasts to communicating effectively through video. It doesn't mean the old expectations have gone, but we've got to build quality teaching and learning and focus on that and not the tech. I know it's EdTech Week, but focus on quality teaching would be my dream and aspiration for the future.
Thank you to you all. I share all those aspirations, and I think it's about people. It's about people like you helping other people, other educators all around the country, and truly, truly grateful and celebrate what you've done on this journey, and think about all of the hundreds of schools that you have all helped, and enormously grateful. And I guess we should rename it EdTech Support Week, Jonathan, because that's what it's about. It's about the support and the guidance and that metaphorical arm around educators. And I guess bread and butter tech is a really lovely description as well. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. This is the first live panel. It hasn't gone without a glitch. It's absolutely superb, or it has gone with the glitch, but you can't notice them. And that is absolutely fantastic. And we had a question on the panel. The website for the EdTech Demonstrator is edtech-demonstrator.lgfl.net. Ask for help. Don't be too afraid to ask for help. And these are the kind of people that you'll be working with. Educator to educator, peer-to-peer support, not judging you, but helping you. Thank you for being part of EdTech Week. Thank you to our panelists, and I'll let you get back to work. Thank you very much.